Greetings, brave adventurers, and welcome to The Keep. My name is Lindsey the Keeper, and it is my duty to tell cringy tales from r/RPG horror stories to protect reality from eldritch horrors with the help of my little friend, Tao. I have a confession that you may or may not have noticed. Not only do I have an unhealthy obsession with dice collections and TTRPGs, but I have a love of mythology. I think it started with a book about dragons that I wanted to get as a child but never got. The myth stories that we have been told from generations through many different cultures. The Egyptian gods, the Greek heroes, and even the Japanese demons and gods that made its mark in modern society. We translated these stories from word to mouth, to books, to movies and TV shows, and even tabletop games. In today's story, Obi tells a tale about being part of a game group with a player who decided to play devil's advocate, and before anyone knew, he did something pretty atrocious. Now, sit back, relax, and cuddle up to your favorite Tindril as we dive into this horror story. Enjoy! Na na na, danger zone. This was written by a deleted user with the title AITA Kitsune Mesmerist Goes Too Far. I should preface this by saying that for a very long time, I thought this was an am I the a-hole situation. After watching a ton of videos with Crit Crab, Den of the Drake, and D&D Doge, I decided that it's probably for the best to get this off my chest and let the community decide if I'm the a-hole or not. This was a game about a year or so ago in Pathfinder 1st Edition in the Curse of the Crimson Throne Adventure Path. A pretty good AP all things considered, played over Roll20 and Discord. So, our cast, names changed of course. The GM, Squall, decent but inexperienced GM, tries to prevent conflict within the party as much as possible, had a steadfast no PvP rule which got abused horrendously. Me, Broddock, ASMR Paladin of Imodia. I'll admit that I min-max a lot with my character. I like making strong characters, it makes me happy. Blair and Tristan, a half-elf alchemist and a construct companion flavored as her child. Good player, just vibes and tries to stay out of drama. Lim and Patty, Evan Hunter with a big ol' grizzly bear companion. Normal player, no issues with them. Crafty, human shaman, spec'd into magic item crafting. Later ditched the campaign because he got bored, but really wasn't a problem player or anything like that. And the problem player, Foxy, Kitsune Mesmerist. Started out playing devil's advocate and a contrarian, but eventually went full dominating an army and you have to deal with it, despite the fact that no one in the party was okay with it, and he slowed down combat, which was already bloated with the companions we had. So, I was scrolling through the Pazzo Discourse LFG channels as I usually do when I have free time and want to shove something in it. Found an ad, messaged the GM, we hit it off, and he said, and I quote, "The party needs someone who can tank, deal damage, heal, and supplement with casting if needed," which in my head is pretty much exclusively Paladin, which I was more than happy with. I've always loved playing Paladins. I joined during the second book of Curse of the Crimson Throne, which mostly involves a plague sweeping through the main city of Corvosa. I quickly wrote a fairly bare-bones backstory since the GM was new to GMing and didn't want anything too heavy. It basically boiled down to angry paladin noises and who is infecting my clergy, and I played it more of a religious brother tending to his flock. He started using lay on hands to remove the disease, but as he became overwhelmed by sheer numbers, he decided to become proactive rather than reactive and march off to the guard to offer his services, to which every group was tackling the plague situation. I met the party along Crafter, who was joining at the same time and everything seemed normal, if a bit cautious with everyone trying to figure out the new character dynamic. Our first real session has us clearing out some vampire spawn and some rare rats, which weren't particularly difficult for such a stacked party. Most sessions proceeded like this: find the plot hook, chase the hook, bunk the baddies, receive loot and XP, the standard RPG affair. The first real issue with Foxy came with the way he intended to use the diplomacy skill. For some people, diplomacy was negotiating and bartering for better prices, talking your way out of a nasty situation and whatnot. This was not the case for Foxy. The party had found a fake clinic for healing the infected. Some of their members had tried to kidnap a PC and we weren't having it. And Foxy suggested sweet-talking the secretary, which seemed like a good idea, so the party gave him the go-ahead as Tristan scouted. Flying and invisibility in theory shouldn't be detectable. However, what Foxy considered sweet-talking was to walk up to the secretary and say, "I rolled diplomacy to gather information." When the GM quite rightly said, "Well, she's flattered. She can't disclose personal information of their clients, especially not when the Queen is personally backing the clinic," which was fairly large due considering at this point we had no idea the Queen was in on the plot. Foxy, however, over voice let out an irritating puff sigh and said, "I'm going to cast suggestion on her," which was successful by then demanding the information which the secretary handed over. He then told her, "Go home and go to sleep," which, while it fit the suggestion, was technically cheating, as you can only issue one suggestion per spell cast, and since nobody at the time knew, in my head I think he knew, but I have no proof one way or another, he got away with it. This was a kind of red flag, but at the time, I just thought he was trying to play a suave, charismatic character and was annoyed his plan had failed. And for quite a while, this was the only thing that cropped it up really. Sometimes he played devil's advocate and a contrarian, but at the start, that was fairly rare. It was only as the campaign went on longer and longer did that behavior crop up more and more. More importantly, it also started a worrying trend with Foxy. The further we got, the less and less RP seemed to appeal to him, and eventually he started getting on other people's cases for having the audacity to roleplay in this role-playing game. When confronted after the session that he started this, his logic was, "It's all pre-written. Whatever we do doesn't matter. It's just wasting time," which I disagree with. The way you RP drastically changes a game dependent on how you do it. You could be the most black-hearted bastard to ever walk the earth, or you might be all that's good and true in this world. RP is vital because it's how players interact and shape the world. Saying it's pointless because it's all pre-written is ridiculous, in my opinion. It's also pissed off the entire group, including the GM, quite badly. I did ask in DMs how people felt. Foxy was alone in this opinion. I didn't do it in general because I didn't want this to seem like I was shitting on him for a hot take. So right off the bat, we are seeing signs that Foxy is going to be a problem player. First off, there is a difference between diplomacy and persuasion. Diplomacy is when you are resolving conflicts peacefully or trying to lower prices on an item, while persuasion is more of trying to sweet-talk someone and trying to be friendly even in hostile situations. They both have the same end goal, but they work quite differently from one another. You can't sweet-talk your diplomacy skill to have an NPC give up private information. Also, the comment about that it's pre-written so it doesn't matter what we do or don't do is a pretty poor excuse for not wanting to roleplay. Even if the game wasn't pre-written, that doesn't mean you can't RP because technically you can change the story by words and actions. That's why a lot of DMs, even when they are using modules, will sometimes improvise certain scenes because what the characters do or didn't do. Of course, we barely scratched the surface on this story, and trust me, Foxy gets way worse. The next issue we had was over the end of the module that our GM had integrated into the campaign. We were effectively taking out a couple of dream hags and hag accessories that were dealing a particularly potent drug, leaving the users vulnerable for the hag's abilities. I don't quite recall what they were doing to the victims, just that the victims were usually paralyzed or dead at the end. After we cleared the module and had this massive warehouse full of illegal and lethal drugs, 4 out of 5 people wanted to destroy it / hand it over to the authorities. I did champion this option pretty hard considering my choice of class and the fact that some of the victims were clergy members. This began a large argument that lasted from 30 to 45 minutes as Foxy wanted to sell it, going from adventurers to drug dealers, for a large amount of gold. Any attempt to walk him through why this was a bad idea was ignored and, in mine and Valerie's case, berated for. Eventually, the GM said that Foxy was overruled and that the group would hand it over to the guard. This was the start of Foxy's behavior becoming truly unbearable. Almost every decision the party made, he played devil's advocate or became a contrarian about with some snarky quip or witty remark that made me want to deck him. During book 3 of 4, the entire group had to do a test of physical prowess to impress a nomadic tribe and earn the respect to gain information for us to chase the plot MacGuffin. This was fine for literally just me and Patty. Everyone else either had dumped strength or hadn't put ranks into the right skills. Foxy quickly started to complain and demanded that we outright skip the content because it wasn't suited to his character, while everyone else scrambled for spells to help them. And home, bull strength, telekinesis, and both Patty and myself just rolled high for a head. As we did some traveling to and from the tribe, trying to earn enough respect to meet an important NPC, Foxy decided to do something questionable as a supposed chaotic good character. During a fight with a fairly minor, plot relevance-wise, but well-built NPC, Foxy cast Dominate Person on them, which in of itself wasn't too bad, bit mean, but I'm not going to complain when the NPC was all but adjacent to Foxy, and Foxy was next on its full attack list. The problem came afterwards when Foxy decided he liked having this NPC and was going to keep it. He was just going to keep the NPC dominated and use him as a trap sponge / extra combatant in combat. Looking at it from an exclusively mechanical aspect, it makes sense. More damage / HP for enemies to deal with, and more action economy to help with tougher fights. The issue is that he didn't consider that 4 out of 5 players see that just keeping an NPC dominated for months on end is definitely slavery. At one point, I told Foxy that either you release your slave to the guards or I'll put them out of their misery. Foxy did not like this. This caused another 30 to 60 minute argument about how what he was doing wasn't slavery and how we were just against him having fun. No one bats an eye as he casually used Murderous Command and other very powerful spells to invalidate encounters, but we hate his fun apparently. Eventually the agreement was made that after the next dungeon, which was the end of the book final dungeon, filled with horribly powerful monsters and traps that we have to deal with, that Foxy would release his slaves and or kill it. No one was particularly happy when the session ended, but most of us were hoping we could get back on track. I had to miss the next session due to IRL scheduling issues, and when I got back to the Discord chat, Apparently something had happened because I had about 30 to 40 messages that really danced around the issue to scroll through that effectively informed that Foxy had done something I wouldn't like. The last comment in the chain had been Foxy saying, "I have a surprise for Broderick," which filled me with a hilarious naive optimism that things were going to work out and that his conflict was at an end. I was an idiot. So before we get to what Foxy did, let's take a bit of a break to talk about what we learned so far. Foxy stated that everyone is taking his fun. Bro, being a drug dealer or a slave owner doesn't seem like a fun thing to do. I'm sure that there will be a couple people who will either state, "It's just a game, it's not a big deal," or "It's just a game, you can do whatever you want," which I will say, no, you don't get to do whatever you want without consequences. Whether it is in-game or out-of-game really depends on who you play with. Even in my dark campaigns idea, slavery is a no-go. Drugs or drug dealers, on the other hand, in a way, could be interesting, but that's also if everyone in the table is okay with it. If not, then okay, no drugs in the campaign. Also, just because your character is not physically built for physical challenges doesn't mean you get to demand that you skip that content. There are other things that you can do that doesn't involve you doing the physical part. Hell, even OP made examples of what the other party members did to help them out. Furthermore, I read the spell Dominant Person for both Pathfinder and D&D to see how the spell works. So in simple terms, the caster who casts the spell, if successful, will give the target a command that doesn't lead to self-destruction, and they have to follow it. However, at the end of each turn, they can make a save throw to get out of it. Now, how long it lasts is different between D&D and Pathfinder, but I think the subject should have a chance to get out of it. I understand that Pathfinder's version is a bit more brutal, but I like to imagine that person was resisting the whole time against Foxy's command. I roll up to the next session and find that we're in combat with some very scary Red Mantis assassins in a pool that is adjacent to a Havro at either level 12 or 13. Luckily, it was asleep and banished through this kind of interdimensional portal thing that only its tentacles can get through. So we didn't have to fight it, just not wake it up. So initiative was rolled for me, and I quickly got up on the map with an explanation that I helped the locals fight off a different attack as an act of good faith. We're still trying to build reputation at this point, and as I rolled to attack a particular Red Mantis assassin that had moved through my reach and provoked it, Foxy exploded saying that one was dominated by him, like the other NPC, and was on our team, which is completely false. I, at the limits of my patience, responded with, "How the f*** am I supposed to know that? We just got done establishing that I wasn't f***ing here last week in character or out of it, and have no idea who cast what spell. I'm not going to metagame so you can play some sick slave-owning fantasy." This was the full limit of my patience, and I contacted the other players after the game and told them that it was either Foxy or me. I was done with his attitude, I was done with his deliberate attempts to annoy me, and I was done with him taunting the no PvP rule like a goddamn shield protecting him from the consequences of his actions. He would at times argue that rule applied to his dominated slaves, which I and the other players shut down immediately. I was surprised to find that most of the other players had talked to the GM beforehand and had reached their limits as well. Eventually, the GM got around to kicking him, and I'm still in that game to this day. I'm not sure how or if I did anything to bother him, or if that's what made him act out, which led to my indecision on whether or not to post this. From my perspective, I can't really think of anything directly confrontational I've done besides making my viewpoint on him dominating NPCs and keeping them as secondary characters very clearly. I was a lawful good paladin, but I never went against the party's interests, party as a whole, and never tried to dictate what other players could or couldn't do. So, RPG horror stories, am I the a-hole here? Cause it's been 13 to 14 months at this point, and I still don't know whether or not I've done anything to contribute to the Mesmerette's behavior. End of story. Well, that establishes that so far, the only Foxy that I will acknowledge is FoxyBard on YouTube. Love her content, great person. I'll put the link to her channel so you guys can watch it, especially since she has more experience with Pathfinder than I do, so go check her out. Anyways, I also realized during the story that I forgot to mention the PvP rule that the DM has. Now, we understand that PvP is not a good idea to use in general. I get that D&D is a cooperative game and you want all the PCs to get along and be friends and companions on a long adventurous journey. But sometimes you just gotta punch a bitch, even if it's just for roleplay purposes. Foxy honestly should have gotten their ass kicked personally. They have been aggressive throughout the game, acted against the party, and then expect OP to be a mind reader when he missed one session for IRL reasons. I think a lot of my DM friends would have not put up with a player like Foxy as long as they did. Now, while there was a poll to see if OP was the a-hole or if Foxy was the a-hole, I am putting my vote that OP, you were not the a-hole. Honestly, you called Foxy on his bullshit, and he could not handle it. While I never like ultimatums, that was probably the one-time exception for it. If anyone agrees or disagrees with me, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to give me more support, you can follow me on my socials through my Linktree, and if you have stories you want me to read, please post them on my subreddit or email it to me. Until then, may you find your worth in the waking world.